It's a 6 countries study conducted within a huge research project during my time at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. And this project dealt with democracy in a broader sense, and it was work involving political science scholars and communication scholars. And what we did within this project, we had a quota sample, a quota in terms of matching the web-based panel survey with the quota matching the census in each of those countries. 2 waves. In some countries it's 3 waves, but only presenting 2 waves here, just to have it comparable. In Switzerland, France, Denmark, Italy, Germany, and in the United Kingdom. Now you will ask me about country selection, and we would talk about that later. This is the most difficult decision in this kind of research. And if I look at the papers from 4 years, 5 years, or 6 years ago, how we selected the countries, I can't remember how we did it and why we did it. We have some theoretical background, but I don't find it convincing anymore. So that's why I'm not presenting it. Nevertheless, it's important to hint that there are, of course, huge differences in those countries when it comes to the political system, discussion cultures, but also when it comes to the topic of unemployment. When we look at a cross-leg model, and we look first at the direction from opinion climate to talk, we find that actually in most countries, except for Switzerland and Denmark, there's a positive effect. That means if people feel they are in a opinion-friendly, in a social environment that has a similar opinion about unemployment than they have, this makes them more likely to talk in the future, but mostly also to people that have the same opinion. Yeah. So it's a kind of I have a friendly opinion climate right now, and this makes me more likely to voice my opinions, but within a friendly opinion environment in the future. It's a causal effect because the autoregressive effect from the prior state of talk is statistically controlled, which is huge, of course. And it's still significant, this cross-legged effect over time. It's a period of 6 weeks. When it comes to cross-cutting talk, the pattern is less clear. You only have an effect in France and the UK, and the reverse effect in Denmark. It's hard to speculate about that. Maybe we can come back to that in the discussion section. But we could say that the effect is less clear in some countries. Opinion climate is unrelated to the likelihood of cross-cutting talk. In some countries, it's positively related. So if you feel you are the majority, this makes you more likely to step out and talk to people that have different opinions because you feel safe. In other countries, in Denmark, it's the opposite, which is quite puzzling to me. You talk less if you feel in the majority. You talk less to people that have different political opinions. So in terms of democratic theory, early on I said, well, ideally, would probably best to have no effect of the opinion climate. We have an effect of the opinion climate, but mostly in a way that you still feel encouraged opinion climate fosters us to talk more in the future to people that have the same opinion. Okay. When you look at the other way around, at the impact, that's quite interesting, on the impact of talk at time 1, on climate at time 2, we find that in some countries there is a positive effect, like Switzerland, Italy, in France, and in Denmark. And for cross-cutting talk in 2 countries, it's a negative influence, which means that if I talk a lot to people that have a similar opinion, it makes me so I will have a more friendly estimation of the opinion climate in the future. And the opposite is true, at least in some countries, for cross-cutting talk. This indicates some notion of a spiral, so that, which we cannot, I go beyond the data now, but it indicates this, kind of, that you have an assessment of the opinion climate. This leads you to talk with others in the future. And this, of course, changes also how you assess your opinion climate later on in the future. This is this dynamic notion. It's beyond the data right now, but it hints, at least, at such a process. When you look at, briefly, when you look at the impact of television and newspaper and internet on the likelihood of like-minded cross-cutting talk, we can confirm prior research that newspaper is the most important in Europe, the most important. So newspaper is really important in Europe, still in Europe, especially for political elites or for people with high political knowledge and high interest. So the more people use newspapers, the more likely they are to engage in discussion with like-minded or opposing people. This is at least significant in the majority of the countries. It's not really surprising given the importance of newspapers in those countries. When it comes to televisions, the findings are less clear. Television hardly has any impact, not a meaningful impact, doesn't really explain why people talk about this topic. When it comes to internet, of course, I can mirror the critique of such simple internet measures. What do you mean with internet? At least internet use with respect to the topic of unemployment, okay, but one could have issues with that. It didn't matter, at least at the time in 2010, it didn't matter at all in explaining the likelihood of political discussion. So summing up, if the media matters, it's mostly newspaper that predicts talk. What I did in additional analysis is also the difference between public service broadcasting and private television. And to see if this helps to explain, of course we would expect that public service broadcasting, it's much more quality news, it's much better news in most of the countries, much less infotainment use, should of course be a higher predictor of those forms of political discussion compared to private television. No clear pattern, no relationship whatsoever. Hard for me to understand what's going on in those countries. It's just a puzzle and no clear pattern. This is also not a perfectly clear pattern, but it's at least something. Finally, when it comes to the values, I only show the two values, the two overarching basic values that might be important for explaining talk. It's self-transcendence and openness to change. And we see that self-transcendence explains in some countries or in 4 countries the likelihood of like-minded talk, and in 2 countries also the likelihood of cross-cutting talk. Openness to change doesn't really matter. So if there's a value or a basic underlying motivational system that explains why we talk, it's probably self-transcendence. Not really an encouraging finding, but because most of the effects are not significant, but it hints to the importance of values, which has, I think, some important theoretical consequences, which we can discuss later on.
This is not a major focus of your study, but I'd like to go back to the media measures because I have some concerns. I'd like to hear your response about how we measure media use. I'm back in the golden age of University of Wisconsin graduate years when I was there. I looked at media reliance. Okay, you're TV reliant or you're newspaper reliant. Let's compare those two. But now we have newspaper, TV, internet. We still have these boxes. Tom Johnson even had these categories of media people, and I'm not sure that's really reflects actually how people use media. Of course, it's coming at them ambiently and they're just getting it. I'm willing to think that newspaper use is a social practice. It's just something deeply rooted. It's an active thing that people are doing. TV and internet, I just wonder if there could be better, more precise, more realistic measures of media behavior. We just had this international symposium for online journalism last week, and we have all these startups and all these, people living in this online world. It seems like in some ways our media measures haven't kept up with the way people actually use media in real life.
I must say that I perfectly agree. The ways we measure media use in survey research is flawed, and this is not news. We've been knowing that for quite some time. In this particular study, what we did, we asked, and this is ironically, what I presented is the findings for those broad measures. And at least for newspapers, there were some effects. Okay. But what we also did is we asked for it. All those measures are flawed because they are subjectively biased. Because people, if you ask, do you use the major tabloid newspaper in the country? And tabloid newspaper means you open it on page 3, there's a naked girl. Okay. This is a survey from the University of Zurich. It's about your opinion on unemployment. Then we ask these things, people say, no, I don't read. Yeah, of course not me. But if you look at the actual numbers, these are the market-leading papers. So there's a subjective bias when reporting. What we also did is, nevertheless, we asked for, in every country, for all major TV stations and major newspapers. How do you use it? occasionally, and then how often a week, how many days a week do you use this particular TV for, or, and I also worked with those measures, ironically, the findings are not really earth-shattering, actually a bit disappointing when you want to strive to confirm your assumptions, of course. Those other measures are even less suited to correlate with the outcome from variables, probably because I think people maybe cannot remember those channels. It's just the cognitive burden is too high. So I agree, but I have no perfect solution in survey research. We need other methods, or like they do in market research, where they actually combine surveys with actual TV. People meet the data, where they really see what people have used. But usually we don't have the money for that, and we use those measures as proxies. And this is